I feel like I'm in my room and I'm like knocking on the door from the inside and be like, Dad, can we come off timeout now? Now that we're on the periphery, can we have a spot at the table? My son was recently confirmed in the old rite of confirmation, little cheek slap. Anyway, it was done with the approval of the local ordinary at a fraternity of St. Peter Parish. We had to drive through a snowstorm just to get there. I feel the need to show this. And as I was driving, I was just thinking, why do we have to go to such great lengths just to attain something that just 2 popes ago was apparently great and sacred? And just listen to some of these quotes from Pope Benedict XVI about the traditional Latin Mass and actually all the old rite sacraments and blessings. He says things like this. This is a pope in living memory said these things. Immediately after the Second Vatican Council, it was presumed that requests for the use of the 1962 Missal would be limited to the older generation which had grown up with it. But in the meantime, it has clearly been demonstrated that young persons too have discovered this liturgical form, felt its attraction, and found in it a form of encounter with the mystery of the Most Holy Eucharist, particularly suited to them. I need more coffee. Also, in parishes where a group of the faithful attached to the previous liturgical tradition stably exists, the parish priest should willingly accede to their request to celebrate Holy Mass according to the rite of the 1962 Roman Missal. He should ensure that the good of these members of the faithful is harmonized with the ordinary pastoral care of the parish, under the governance of the bishop in accordance with Canon 392, avoiding discord and favoring the unity of the whole Church. The present norms are also meant to free bishops from constantly having to evaluate anew how they are to respond to various situations. It almost feels like you could, like that phrase right there could be written for like the next letter that comes out after Traditionis. Here's another quote. Looking back over the past to the divisions which in the course of the centuries have rent the body of Christ, one continually has the impression that at critical moments when divisions were coming about, not enough was done by the Church's leaders to maintain or regain reconciliation and unity. One has the impression that omissions on the part of the Church have had their share of blame for the fact that these divisions were able to harden. This glance at the past imposes an obligation on us today to make every effort to enable for all those who truly desire unity to remain in that unity or to attain it anew. I mean, that is a pastor's heart. And this is one of the most famous quotes associated with Summorum Pontificum. What earlier generations held as sacred remains sacred and great for us too. I just gotta let that soak in. And it cannot be all of a sudden entirely forbidden or even considered harmful. That's so good. It behooves all of us to preserve the riches which have developed in the Church's faith and prayer, and to give them their proper place, which apparently 14 years later was definitely not in the parish. Pope Francis said this in Traditionis Custodes. Bishops should, quote, designate one or more locations where the faithful adherents of these traditional groups may gather for the Eucharistic celebration. Not, however, in the parochial churches, and without the erection of new personal parishes, when you won't let that celebration take place in a parish church, and new personal parishes can't be erected, there's not much left. You essentially just create little trad ghettos. And then the Dicastery for Divine Worship followed up with this. The exclusion of the parish church is intended to affirm that the celebration of the Eucharist according to the previous rite, being a concession limited to these groups, is not part of the ordinary life of the parish community, and that such a celebration should not be included in the parish mass schedule. Now, when I read over Traditionis Custodes and Pope Francis's accompanying letter and the responses from the DDW, I actually see a tension between the desire to be pastoral and, frankly, the desire to phase out the TLM, because the DDW says things like this: indications about how to proceed in your dioceses are chiefly dictated by two principles. On the one hand, to provide for the good of those who are rooted in the previous form of celebration. Here comes the tension, and need to return in due time to the Roman rite promulgated by Saints Paul VI and John Paul II. And then he goes on to say, and on the other hand, to discontinue the erection of new personal parishes tied more to the desire and wishes of individual priests than to the real need of the holy people of God. I'm not saying that that doesn't exist, but I don't know a single place where that exists, where it's just like this one priest wants to do his thing, and we shouldn't erect parishes just for that priest. I'm not entirely sure what's meant by that, but okay. And the DDW says this: there is no intention in these provisions to marginalize the faithful who are rooted in the previous form of celebration. But here's the deal. We're not in a place right now, pastorally, where you can have both of those things, where you can have providing for the good of the people attached to the older celebration and also not have it anymore. Just pastorally, it's not going to work. You're going to have to live with the fact that there are people attached to these things and very attached to these things. They will drive through a snowstorm to get to them. And I'm super grateful that in our diocese, our bishop found a very TC kosher way for us to continue to go to the traditional Latin Mass on Sunday. But not everyone fared that well. Some people were really marginalized. And when you get marginalized by the church like that, what that starts to feel like is, there's no place for you here. A lot of the people who go to the traditional Latin Mass have been spiritually abused. And for us to just kind of push those people out to the margins only pours salt in the wound. Now, I'm not going to pretend like trads are somehow guileless here, okay? Stereotypes exist for a reason. I mean, I know there are files in chancery offices for the angry trad letters, but when one of my kids acts up, I don't put them all on timeout. And I certainly don't punish them for wanting good things. It's like putting one of my kids on timeout because he wants to pray the rosary in Latin. It's like, he wants to pray the rosary. We actually do pray the rosary in Latin. The restrictions that are being placed on the TLM are afflicting the mystical body of Christ. And I think that the faithful saw that, especially right after Traditionis Custodes came out. In fact, just after that happened, I was talking to my neighbor, older woman. She attends the 5:30 Saturday evening Mass, and she had heard about it because, you know, we live in the world and there's news. And she knew that my family attended the traditional Latin Mass. And she was like, what's this all about? I heard that you guys, you're not going to be able to go to Mass at a parish just down the street. Call me a pope splainer, whatever. I don't care. I always try to be delicate with these situations. And I didn't know what to tell her, honestly, because the reality was this. The Pope was telling us that we couldn't go to Mass in that form of the Roman Rite at that parish. There was no way around it. So that's what I told her. And she said, just let people worship the way they want to worship. And honestly, like, yeah, I mean, it might not be theologically deep, but I think there's a lot of truth to it. And I think that's kind of what Summorum Pontificum was really kind of getting at. If people find this edifying, let them have it. It's okay. We actually had friends who didn't go to the Latin Mass, but they went that weekend after the TC came out just to show us support. I mean, because they could see that we were being afflicted and it was hard for them. And as a father, it made it very difficult to explain why we weren't going to be going to the church that we normally went to for Mass on Sunday, because I want my kids to feel like they have a place in the church. I want them to feel like the church loves them. I want them to feel like the Pope loves them. And I know some trads will disagree with this comment, but at the end of the day, it's a liturgical preference. And I just don't see why people need to be punished for that liturgical preference, especially considering what previous popes have said about it. I think Pope Leo now is in this awkward situation where he's going to have to walk back what Traditionis Custodes laid down. But you know what? If he did that, it wouldn't be the first time that a pope reversed something that a previous pope said about the traditional Latin Mass via a motu proprio. And honestly, as a father myself, I walk back my rules all the time. Timeouts shouldn't last forever. If they do, then they're just solitary confinement, and that's cruel and unusual. Actually, on that trip through the snowstorm to my son's confirmation, my 7-year-old had fed my 16-month-old, unbeknownst to me, 4 fruit pouches and a granola bar and a half. And so 3 minutes before we got to the church, my 16-month-old just lost it. He just threw it all up, all over himself, all over the van. It was crazy. And then after Mass, I locked myself out of the van. So that was $125 right there. If you want to offset that $125, you should support this channel. Just check out the link in the description. Thanks.